Attention. The Too Savage for Democrats podcast contains offensive content, dark humor, and is not suitable for liberals or mild-mannered children. For legal purposes, everything we say is satire.
All right. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of the Too Savage for Democrats podcast. This is episode number 104. Here we are on the show. And I realize, there's a couple of things I realized at the beginning of the show. Number one, I realize my voice is gone. It's working its way back, but it's gone. And the reason it's gone is because of Super Bowl Sunday. So I realize that. But it is coming back. We're working on it. Sometimes I might have to clear my throat, get it going, whatever. Number two, second thing I realize is that the camera, and you can blame this on producer Steve, right? I want all of this to be put on producer Steve. So if you're in the Discord, if you're part of the Patreon, tag producer Steve and blame this on him. We have the camera, like I just couldn't set up the camera the same way producer Steve does. I don't even know if I'm in focus. I really don't. And, you know, because you have to have somebody sitting here to get it in focus. And usually, like, you know, I sit here and then producer Steve does it. Also, like, it's kind of high. I don't know what's going on, but that's the thing. Third thing, this is coming out a day late. And I realized that. It wasn't supposed to. In fact, we had another show that I recorded yesterday that came out yesterday with KP Richards as the guest. But I completely botched the audio on that. And so that wasn't able to come out. But I did send it into the Patreon. So the Patreons are actually getting two shows, patreon.com/TSFDpod. They're actually getting two shows, including this entire video podcast. So if you're a member of the Patreon, congratulations. This week you get two shows. So yeah, that's pretty cool. But anyway, a lot of stuff to talk about. I'm super excited. And I do have some changes toward the back end of the show that I want to propose to the listening audience that you might be interested in. But let's get started with some of the stuff we're going to be talking about. And I want to start off with maybe the biggest story of the day. This is a story that really caught my attention and got me thinking. And I was scrolling through social media, and Disclose.tv. Now, I don't know how credible this is, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was 100% accurate. Disclose.tv posted on Twitter and said, new Instagram to permanently ban users that send hate speech. And if you're watching the video podcast, YouTube Dylan's Daily Show, you can see my air quotes. That send hate speech in their private direct messages, the social media platform announced. So they're literally going to start going after accounts that you, like, not only do you have to not post hate speech, and by the way, like at this point we all understand hate speech is just something that, like, somebody doesn't like. Like, there's really no such thing as hate speech anymore. That's gone. There used to be. And I think there are still objective things that, like, you probably shouldn't say to certain people that could be offensive or whatever. Like, and that's fine. Like, before being offended it had to be some serious shit. Like, remember that? And then now being offended is just like, oh, hey, I support the opposite political candidate. And it's like, oh my God, like, you just offended me, like, what? And so that's what being offended is now. And hate speech is the same kind of thing. Hate speech is literally anything that the left doesn't agree with. Like, that's what it's become. Like, if you're a leftist or whoever you are, that's at this point what hate speech has become. Is it has become anything that the left doesn't agree with. And I would find it difficult if I were a leftist to argue against that. But so not only can you not post anything on social media, on Instagram, but now you can't even send a DM. And I don't know how far back, like, I am a little bit worried. And I think a lot of people are probably worried as well, because I don't know how far back I have to go and delete stuff, because I've been sending, you know, as part of course, obviously it's a joke. Nothing I say is intended to be taken seriously. Hate speech messages for a long time on Instagram. I am like the CEO of the hate speech message on Instagram. And now I'm hearing this and I'm like, well, my accounts are gone. All of them, because I do this on every account. And I'm sure that's the same with a lot of people. Our accounts are just going to be deleted. Like, there's going to be no Instagram accounts. Who, like, honestly, I would like to know somebody who hasn't ever sent anything offensive on Instagram in the DMs. Right. Or hasn't like slid into a chick's DMs or something like that with some pickup line that's also hate speech. Like, who knows what's going on? All I know is my accounts are gone. And that actually freaks me out. You know, not because my accounts, like if my accounts get deleted, like I really could care less. Social media is toxic. I don't think it would be a bad thing if we all just moved on from social media. Obviously, we'll still have the Two Savage for Democrats podcast. But if we all just kind of moved on from social media platforms, you know, kind of went our separate ways, I don't think that would necessarily be the worst thing for society. I think society would benefit very much from not having social media platforms. But it does concern me because it shows how far they're willing to go. And I knew this would happen. And I've talked about this on the podcast a couple times. Because when Trump was president, there was very little done during the Trump administration to prevent social media censorship. Sorry, I got to clear my throat. There was a lot of talking, right? There was a lot of like, we're so against the censorship. We don't want people to be censored. It's so unfair. But there wasn't really much action, right? That was like that's the problem. And I warned, I said, because of the fact that there wasn't much action, now we're going to be seeing problems down the road. And we are. Now they're going after DMs. Like it started off, it was, well, if you posted some bad content. And by the way, how about the fact that they're not censoring like the actual bad stuff? Like I've seen some I haven't seen it personally, but I've been told about like just straight up child porn on Twitter. Just literal child porn. And Twitter does nothing. They like, oh, sorry, we didn't know it's there. But then someone tweets out like, you know, Trump actually won the election and it was rigged. And Twitter's like regardless of the size, they just pounce on it. And then there's some like literal child porn and nothing's going on. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's ridiculous. The state of the social media censorship right now. It's insane. I think, as sad as it is to say, I don't think this is the worst it's going to get going after DMs. I think that's going to happen everywhere. And like, at the beginning of this whole thing, I kind of understood. I didn't agree with it, but I understood where the social media companies were coming from, right? Where they said, well, we just want this to be a safe place, you know, for everybody. We want to make sure nobody's being targeted or bullied, even though cyberbullying's fake. But people, you know, we don't want to make targeting or bullied or whatever on our platforms. And like that makes sense, and they want it to be this thing. But when you start going after literal instances where nothing's happening or private DMs between two individuals, like that's crazy. Can you imagine if a phone company like T-Mobile, because they own everything now, if T-Mobile came out and just said, oh, hey, I don't like your text messages that you have with your friend, so I'm just going to go ahead and cancel your service. I mean, that'd be crazy. But for some reason, people in society look at social media and like the, you know, communication via media, social media, and like cable and talking over the phone service and everything like that as two different things. I look at it as the same thing. I would say they're both the same thing at this point. But people look at them in different ways. That needs to change. We need to start looking at that because it is, I do think they're overstepping. I do think it's reaching a dangerous point. I do think it's setting an unsafe precedent. But we'll see what happens through all this. I mean, this could not happen. I mean, maybe they'll get a bunch of backlash and not do it, but they haven't really cared about backlash up to this point. So I'm not too hopeful about that. All right, next topic. We have really gone quite, you know, a ways since Trump, you know, initiated the China ban. Remember the China ban at the beginning of this COVID virus, where if you lived in the literal outbreak hub of the COVID coronavirus, you weren't allowed to fly to the United States or whatever. And everyone was like, well, I mean, that's racist. That's xenophobic or whatever the hell they called it. But it wasn't. It was literally that. And then eventually everybody started agreeing with it. Well, now, and again, remember that. Joe Biden didn't agree with that, said it was a bad thing when it happened. Eventually he came around and realized it was the right move. But at the time, he said it was bad, said he didn't agree with it, all that. This is just hilarious. Now we've gone from that, Biden hating that. We've gone from that to now Joe Biden wants to institute domestic travel bans, like literal domestic travel bans. Which means, for those of you who don't know what domestic means, it literally means like you can't travel freely within your own country, which is outrageous. And they're doing it because they say, well, we're afraid, that with these new mutations going around, that we're going to reverse the progress that we've made. And it's like, what progress? Like, the virus is still here. There's still a ton of people dying. They're now recommending double masking. You've botched the entire vaccine district. Like, what progress are you talking about that we've seen so much of? If you can explain to me what progress we're seeing, because according to the media, this is like we're in for a cold winter, and it's just going to be the worst thing that anybody's ever seen, and we're all dead, right? And we've handled this thing completely wrong, obviously, and I've talked about that on numerous occasions. But now they're wanting to restrict the free travel of literal U.S. citizens going from place to place. Like, how do you justify that as a as the president of the United States, who, by the way, is supposed to be bringing unity? So this is from the Charlotte Observer, charlotteobserver.com. The Biden administration is considering whether to impose domestic travel restrictions, including on Florida. Fearful of coronavirus mutations are threatening the reverse. By the way, if the coronavirus mutate, like, if we've learned anything from the first strain of COVID, it's that if the virus is here, it's already here. If we're starting to find, like, that was the biggest problem, is that at the beginning of this thing, when we started finding cases, we were like, oh, we got it under control. Like, we can just do that. But then we realized the R naught value was so high, it was so contagious, that we really didn't have it under control, and it was much worse than everybody thought. This, what I just told you. It's the same thing with this. If we're finding it, like, when they came out and they were like, new case found in, whatever state, I'm like, well, it's widespread in that state. There's not just one. If there's just one, there's several. Like, look, and I've never been a COVID. Like, I admit this thing is contagious. This thing is real. This thing exists. I don't think it's as deadly as the media pretends to say, unless you're like a straight up butter golem with comorbidities or old. But if you're not that, you're probably going to be fine. Like, statistically, you've literally almost got a 100% chance of surviving this thing. But yeah, anyway, so now he's looking at the COVID restrictions. But I'm saying, like, this, it's already widespread if it's there. Discussions in the administrations over potential travel restrictions do not target a specific state, but focus on how to prevent the spread of variants that appear to be surging in a number of states, including Florida and California. Quote, there are active conversations about what could help mitigate the spread here, but we have to follow the data and see what's going to work. By the way, following the data just didn't work, because following the data led us to the lockdowns, and then the numbers kept going up, and then we realized that the majority of the spread from this virus occurred in the house. So when you locked everybody in the house, you're just skyrocketing the numbers. But we're having conversations about anything that would help mitigate the spread, the official said, referring to discussion about the new travel restrictions that could target the spread of the UK mutation, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I mean, they're literally trying to lock down domestic travel because of COVID. So I hope, you guys can let me know your thoughts. If you're watching this on YouTube, Dylan's Daily Show, you can comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. If you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, or SoundCloud, Too Savage for Democrats podcast, you can just go to YouTube, Dylan's Daily Show, and comment down below if you want to get involved in the conversation, or just join the Patreon and join the call and tell me what you think. You can do either one of those. Patreon.com/GFCPod. Obviously, I don't support this. I think it's completely outrageous. And I just don't think it's going to work, because it is more of a domestic kind of situation, and I feel like that's a lot harder to manage, and there's a lot more ways to get around that domestically than like a lockdown from another country. Like, when you have a lockdown from another country, I feel like it's a lot harder to get around that kind of situation than it is just like kind of a domestic lockdown. So and I feel like there's more loopholes with that, but that's just my opinion. I want to hear your guys' thoughts, so comment down below. All right, so I kind of had an idea, and I wanted to get to this before I end the show here, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because I started this podcast in May of 2018, and I've done one show a week, right? That was kind of the trend, is like one podcast a week. I'd upload it, and that would be that. But I've realized, like, the way I like to talk about topics isn't I don't like to draw them out. Like those last two topics I just did, right? I talk about it, I give my opinion, I say share yours, and then I move on, right? I don't want to spend like 45 minutes talking about a topic. I want to move on from topic to topic, talk about what's relevant. And one of the issues I've been facing over the past couple of weeks, especially like around election time and past the election, was that there was so much going on every single day, and I would just have like a notes folder full of shit that I really wanted to talk about, and then I would start the podcast, and then I would be scrolling through, and I'm like, that's not relevant anymore, that's not relevant anymore. So half of my topics like just aren't relevant, and that's the case with this week as well. Like I have a ton of topics of stuff that happened like last Thursday, that I can't even talk about. So I had an idea. And I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And I think I might do it, just test it out, see if it impacts the views numbers or anything like that. I just, I want to be sure. But I was thinking about doing multiple podcasts a week. I don't know what schedule I would have. Maybe I wouldn't have a schedule. Maybe I would just upload the podcast so you guys can make sure you're subscribed. YouTube, Dylan's Daily Show, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Too Savage for Democrats podcast. And just upload multiple episodes a week. And then sometimes we'll have guests, like we'll do the Wednesday show. There will be a show Wednesday for sure regardless, and that'll be with producer Steve. But I was thinking like maybe throwing in a couple more shows, but then keeping the length of them down. So like maybe I'll do like 3 or 4 20-minute podcasts a week or something like that, where I just talk about whatever's going on and then I move on from there. I feel like that might be a good situation, good way to handle this because of the like kind of information overload thing that's going on. Obviously, we'd still do the Wednesday podcast. That would still come out because we have producer Steve there for that every other week. So I would still do the Wednesday show because I want people to make sure they come back and they have a show on Wednesday and then they can go back and listen to what they missed. But I also want to give the Patreons more content because I feel like, we have people paying monthly to be a member of the Patreon at patreon.com/TS50pod. And while they do get access to the video podcast, while they do, get access to all this stuff, I would also like to give them more content and everything like that. So, I don't know. I thought that'd be an interesting idea as I kind of wrap this show up because now I've gone through the relevant. Like, I have more topics to talk about. I want to talk about the Super Bowl. But the Super Bowl happened on Sunday. And like every single dude with, involved in sports has now talked about the Super Bowl. Nobody wants to hear fucking Too Savage for Democrats political head talk about the Super Bowl now. I mean, it's like you've heard everything. I know Brady's the GOAT. Mark Cuban, no more anthem at the thing. I really want to talk about that, but everything's been said about that. Like, what I mean? Like I would have loved, yesterday when that story broke to just throw down a fucking podcast and be like, yo, Mark Cuban just banned that and just go over that. So yeah, that's kind of my idea, and we'll see how this goes. But let me know in the comments if you're listening to this or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this one now. Number 1, because the camera's going to die. Number 2, because I need to collect more topics for the next one. But yeah, show every Wednesday, and who knows, I might scatter some shows here and there throughout the week. So anyway, I appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining. Patreon.com/TSFTpod. If you want to subscribe to the Patreon, get access to calls, gaming sessions, video podcasts, deep topic podcasts, everything. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.